All right, so how'd you do there on those swing wraps, huh? Did you get the 7? Here you can see for more or less what it looks like when the chain has completely wrapped all the way around the pole. There's some overlap here and there, some slanting, just some really nasty stuff here, which is crazy. All right, so we saw what happened here. We have to go back, and we did a lot of things here in Act 1 and in Act 2, but let's go back to Act 1 and revisit a few things. So first off, we have to find out who put down that initial guess. Like, who is the closest here? And this is why it's so important that we capture things that students give us. Digitally, we capture it, or on the wall, or with the stickies. So we give some math love, and a quick way to do that in class is just to ask your students to give one clap on 3, like 1, 2, 3, clap, and then you move on. So cool. But the great thing about this is that kid that initially guessed might not have done the math, but they probably are feeling pretty good about themselves that they just had a good guess or a good hunch on how many times that swing was going to wrap around the pole. That's really cool. Uh, we also talk about if we weren't exactly right, what could account for the error here. And this is fantastic. This is what I love about math class, that it allows us to talk about the theoretical versus practical. So on our papers, like maybe theoretically we said it would wrap around 9 times or 10 times or whatever, or we had to adjust. But is that what the math, is that the math that is accurate? Is that math accurate? Is it going to make a great prediction here for what actually happens in the practical answer? And that's really cool. And I'm not saying that you need to now go to Google and Google up images of chains wrapped around cylindrical devices or posts or poles and say, yep, see guys, this is where this math is. I mean, we could. There are people that have designed these things to account for chains, but it's messy out there. And I don't want to say to any student like, yeah, this is something that you'll all be doing. But for me, it was fun. It was exhilarating to sit there and actually work out the possible math on this task in the playground. I went there and I did that, and that was so cool. And I came up with my prediction. I'll share it with you later. And I was like, wow, I wonder if this is actually going to come close. And that's so cool. Another part of Act 1 was students were asking tons of questions, hopefully. And some silly maybe, some not silly, but what questions did we not answer? And those can range anywhere from, why is this guy doing this? And I don't want to, like, a kid might say, well, why are you doing this? What's the point of this? And we might think like that kid's trying to get under our skin, but it's a valid question. Like, why is this crazy guy wrapping the swing around the pole? And I'm sure some adults are like, I hate when I take my kids to the playground and somebody has done this to the playground with the swings. And I always will take them down, but yeah, I'm right there with you. So why is, we got to revisit these questions, and here's the main reason why. If you don't go back, excuse me, if you don't go back and address the questions that were asked and up front by students, then you won't get those questions again next time. They're going to think, oh, he doesn't care. She doesn't care about my questions. The teacher only had one question in mind, and they don't really pay attention to mine, so why should I ask questions again? So go back and revisit those questions. And remember, if you've captured them, it makes it easy. If you've captured them on paper, on the whiteboard, or some digital spreadsheet, that's super important. Okay? So that's crazy. Now we also got to validate student work. We got to capture that. Bust out your cell phone. Take pictures of kids' work. Have them turn it in. It's so vital to do that. So let's talk about student work here. But before I talk about student work, let me share with you the power of Twitter and the online math community that you can call on and ask for help. So I went through Twitter and I asked a few teachers to do some things for me. So I asked 6 teachers to do some cool things for me. The nice thing about this group here is I have a wide range of teaching levels. I've got all the way from an elementary math coach and teacher to high school math teachers, and with middle school teachers as well. We've got a range of coaches and a range of teachers, and that's very fun. And also different time zones. So I had them work on the problem individually, and then I connected them as well in pairs. I paired them up and said, hey, compare your solution strategy with somebody else. And I can't thank them enough for doing this for me. I'm super appreciative for the work and the time they put in. But it was so cool to listen to their Hangouts. So I had them jump online, do a Google Hangout, and say, hey, like, share with each other, share your frustrations, share your questions, share your strategies, and just work this thing out. And I got to listen. And so here are some of my favorite quotes from some of the math teachers. So Fawn starts this off with saying there's this inch worth of gnarliness, and she's talking about the chain. I told you guys this task was going to be messy. She said she would love to see a close-up of one wrap or two wraps. So hey, how cool is that I had that picture if a student wanted it? Michael here, oh here, there are the two wraps by the way, right? That might be helpful for a student. Michael said this is a problem where the more data, the more fun it would be. And who knows, like maybe Michael's weird like that. Maybe you don't want all that data. But if you did get all that data, what would be an easy thing to tell your kids to do? Round. Like you had tons of fractions in there with all those messy measurements. Like I'm hoping that we're going to talk about rounding here because it's going to get messy. Talking about messy, love that Sadie says nothing's ever clean. Nothing's ever a perfect whole number. She was working this out with her buddy Jonathan here. And, she's like, this is so important. Jonathan says, and the chain will only stack on itself so much. It'll just slip. And we saw that in the end. When the chain is done wrapping around the pole, it's going to do weird things. And that's good. That's awesome. That messiness is fun in a math class. Shauna says, I drew a picture. I'm a labeler, and I'm very visual. I need to see everything. We gotta honor those kids. Draw pictures. We gotta recommend that we have all kids draw pictures. That's so cool. She drew a picture. She threw some labels out there. She shared her solution strategy with Joe. Joe says, that's why the estimation is very powerful for me. Intuitively, I could see that those two answers were wrong. So what happened was Joe's initial guesses were his guiding light, let's say, for his solution. And when he did his solution, he thought, wow, I'm way off. I need to go back and revisit this. So getting down that initial estimate was cool. Now, in my sessions at CMC, I stole an idea from Joe. And what Joe did was he went around his house, looked for a pole, and looked for some chain. And he used this to help him create a proportion with what should happen mathematically and what actually happened on the pole, and then he used that scale to compare it to what we were dealing with on the playground. And that's cool, and that inspired me. And these are many things I probably would not have thought of on my own, and that's the power of the online community. So now that you've seen some of the online friends here, I'll share with you my solution strategy that I came up with as I sat down on the playground. I started with one circle, the pole, found the circumference of it, and said, hey, the chain will wrap around it 7.65 inches worth. Then I increased the diameter, saying, oh, well, if that thing wraps around, I'm going to increase the diameter of the new pole plus the chain that wraps around it once, and I'm going to get a new circumference here. I just kept doing that, kept adding the chain length of 3/16 to each side, or of if you want to call it a side, of each pole, and I ended up coming up with about 7 to 8 wraps. That's crazy. It blew my mind. If you got early finishers in your class and you're working on a modeling task, the coolest trick I learned from Dan Meyer here is to flip the math on kids and get them to create something for you. What might that look like here? How about a kid finds the diameter of a pole in which a 100-foot chain swing would wrap around 20 times? I don't know. They're creating the pole now this time. It's kind of like this picture right here. Like I've got this super long chain for an anchor on a boat. What would I need to wrap that chain around? You know, kind of crazy. You'll notice maybe earlier on my whiteboards, I carved out a section and said, don't work here, leave it open. And that was for the title. And so you'll notice I didn't start the task saying, hey, yo, guys, what's up? We're going to do circumference today. I rarely ever start lessons like that with kids anymore because here's the deal. A kid might go, oh man, I was terrible at circumference last year. Man, we got to do that again today. And they've cashed out. But now if we put it at the end and we say, look, like what did we use today? And here's where on the large whiteboards you might carve out a section and say, as a group, come up with a title here that makes sense to you guys. And if I want to support my students, maybe they need a sentence frame where they fill in the gaps. But that's kind of no fun because it takes away that creative energy that they might have. But if they're really struggling, I'll put it up there. And here's the one I came up with, but I'm sure you could come up with one way more interesting than mine. So I would say we use the diameter and the circumference of a pole to wrap a swing. We could say maybe this is a 7th grade standard. It could be some other standards here and there too, but that's the one I felt attached to this one for me. So here's a huge question. Why do we do these things?